Okay, so this lecture, the topic is mixed use architecture. So we're going to look at projects by architects all over the world and talk about this typology of mixed use. Thinking back into history, can anyone think of some of the first uses of mixed use, maybe in Western civilization, that we can think of? Well, let's first define mixed use. So how do we define mixed use architecture? Yeah. Yeah, multiple programs occupying the same property. So this idea of mixing various programs together, whether it's stacking them, aggregating them on the same site, having them both kind of in the same village typology. There's a lot of ways we can do it as architects and planners, but some of the first examples of mixed-use architecture come out of really the ancients, or the Romans. We had mixed-use architecture, commercial on the ground level, and then residential above. There's examples of this in the Middle East. You can go into ancient China and see examples of these kind of donut-shaped buildings called tulos, and they were complete as the entire city built in a courtyard fortress, essentially. And so you look back into history and even medieval times, there were examples of mixed-use architecture where, whether it was just because there wasn't a lot of real estate and they had to be conservative with the amount of land they had, so things were forced to be kind of on the same property, or it was part of civic life and part of culture to not only kind of work somewhere but live in that same building or be a part of that same vibrancy of the urban center. So the history of mixed use goes back pretty far, and we want to explore directions that it's going, but also realize that it has a place in history, and it's kind of forged what we have today. So this first project, this is a mixed-use waterfront development by Foster and Partners. Norman Foster, globally renowned architect, maybe one of the top 5 or top 10 in the world, famous for designing the Apple campus, among other noteworthy projects globally. Their work is often very minimal, very subtle, but an attention to detail, attention to materials, craft, a lot of really nice architecture. So from this first image, this project in Melbourne, you're able to see the relationship of this building to the waterfront. That's the first thing that kind of sticks out here. And you're also noticing the relationship between nature and architecture, where the greenery is kind of brought into the roofs, into these balconies. And so just from looking at this, you can probably guess that there's retail on the ground level and residential above. Continuing to see these renderings, you're seeing, part of the renderings that an architect's office produces, you have to look at not just the subject matter, but the perspectives that are taken, right? What area, what's being highlighted, what's emphasized in the image, where's the perspective being taken from? So from this first image, you can see that there's clearly a distinction that's being made, right? The building isn't really in the foreground. It's about the activity and recreation and park space, and then the connection, then the building is kind of in the background. So the relationship between architecture, public infrastructure, public park, recreation, those are all things that are highlighted in an image like this. So when you're viewing projects, think about, the way that these images are composed, right? Everything is a composition. So as designers, we don't just have control over the actual architecture, the design of it. We have control over the means of representation of that work. So always keep that in mind when you're presenting and you're creating drawings or images of the project. always recognize the things that you're showing and the things that you're subtly hiding or subtly kind of keeping in the background. This next image showing that there's an active kind of rooftop to this. Greenery along the balconies. So again, this is the residential portion of the project. What do you notice just in terms of the scale? So you're seeing the commercial on the ground level or retail on the ground level and residential above. What can you notice just about the scale?
This feels very human.
Okay, it's a very human scale, right? You don't see, parking everywhere and huge spaces meant for cars. What else? Compare the scale of the first floor to the residential levels above.
When we would practice first floor, but then as you go back, the there, on the floor, it goes up.
Yeah, we have a higher ground floor. The floor to ceiling in the retail spaces is much higher, maybe double height spaces in the ground level. And you'll see that in historic architecture. You'll see that in kind of the downtown core of Los Angeles. Any major city you go to, you'll see these double height spaces on the ground level and then more typical residential ceiling heights above. So that's a way of creating spaces that are to scale with the activity and the use of that space. And also, just architecturally, you're noticing kind of the opening up of this development, right? There isn't necessarily one front door. It's more of an urban gesture where the volumes open up. There's a lot of glass that draws you in. There's something enticing about that courtyard. And it kind of continues the architecture of this staggering geometry. It's continued into the landscape. So all of these kind of landscape walls, pony walls, whatever you want to call them, they kind of stagger and work their way into the landscape. So another rendering, and again, notice what's being shown in this composition. This is a rendering, not a photo, so always realize that there's a lot of care that goes into the positioning of the camera, right? The eye level. It is at eye level, right? You can see a horizon line kind of connecting everyone's eye, but what's in the foreground is people sitting at a cafe. So that's the kind of primary view here. It's more about the experience and what it's like to inhabit this courtyard than it is about the architecture being a sculpture. Yeah. I don't know the software. A lot of offices will use 3D Studio Max and V-Ray to do kind of professional renderings. There's a lot of offices and a lot of different softwares that are out there. Cinema 4D is another professional rendering software that people use. But yeah, and there's also Photoshop work that goes into an image like this. So yeah, this is clearly going for realism in the rendering quality. There's other techniques you can approach when you're thinking about rendering. You can go for more cartoon-like graphics. Always think about kind of the overall feeling and the overall intent of the image. If it's to convince someone that this is real, then I think you're doing a pretty good job with images like this, right? I mean, this is clearly meant to be published and to go on blogs and gain public interest in the project. You'll see other renderings in this lecture of other projects, and maybe the intent is a little bit different. Maybe it's more to be cutting edge or show that this is still an idea, right? You don't want to show images that are hyper realistic if you're worried that the client is going to get anxious about, okay, is this built? How far along is this design? You want to be careful about what you're showing. So another elevated view showing the public recreation. So there's actual basketball court on the roof, so showing how occupiable the roof is, and by stepping the building, you're actually getting light deep down into the courtyard and into the lower units, rather than just having an extrusion go vertically straight up. This is also a structural thing too. By stepping back, you're reducing the the vertical cantilever of the project. Instead of being this flagpole that's in the ground, you're stepping back and creating a little bit more stability. So it's a structural, it's a light condition, it's about public space, and it's about creating public balcony or private balconies that all get natural light, and they're all unique. So that could be a selling feature for any developer. Okay, this is the Afarinesh Tower. So this is in northern Iran. This is a mixed-use complex formed as a uniform regular core, housing administrative spaces. They lose their rigid order as the levels change and the program becomes recreational. This tower is designed by Alireza Tagaboni and his team at NextOffice. So the main idea of the project can be found in its section diagram. So in the tower section, the project varies in spatial terms as its regular and uniform form from the administrative spaces to the central core. So recreational spaces lose their initial rigid order, and changing the floor's levels creates different voids, and the diagram changes. So the scheme consists of 24 floors above ground and 5 basement floors offering 700 parking spaces and a basement hypermarket with 76 commercial units and food courts. The conversion of the common monolithic volume of towers into 3 pieces placed in an underlying podium helps the tower to be perceived as an urban park. So natural light gets deep into the building. That's always the challenge in any architecture, whether it's a high-rise, a cathedral, the question, or a house, right? How do you get light deep into the space? How do you get natural light into the architecture? So that's something that, in this case, the architect clearly defined. They said, okay, there's going to be these 3 vertical volumes. We're going to let light deep into the core of the building with these large windows, and the section is going to work with those large openings. So the section of the building, you can see the kind of 3-part nature of this tower, and these cleaves in the building, these clefts, they're meant to create some variability in the program, kind of identify the different mixed use, but also create kind of a sculptural interior. And you can see in section that these aren't just horizontal floor slabs. There's a lot of variation. As a section, this is really interesting. So the rendering, and again, think of the perspective that's taken. This is at eye level. Maybe the intentions were a little different from the Foster and Partners renderings, right? Maybe here it's more about being avant-garde, maybe a little bit more cutting edge with the design, right? It's shot with a wide-angle camera lens. Again, it's a rendering, but you have to think about the perspective, the lighting, the dramatic angle that it's being shot at. So those are all considerations when creating these images. Right, an interior a little bit more desaturated than what you would maybe expect, but you can see that huge vertical atrium, how the spaces can be viewed on multiple levels. So you can look down, see people make connections. There's balconies. So again, the section is really interesting, and that's what you experience here. It's less about the floor plan here and more about what's happening vertically, and how this could be this kind of urban vertical core or an urban courtyard. And you'll see, we'll talk about that idea of kind of a vertical courtyard when we get to some of Tom Main's projects in LA. Here you can see a swimming pool also bathed in natural light, really high ceiling, stair core, very sculptural stair. So also kind of working with the sculptural form of the exterior. So this next project, the Viper Room development, this is also a rendering. This is a project by Tom Main, Morphosis. This is Sunset Boulevard in the foreground, and you can clearly see the idea of mixed use here. Just from looking at this image, what are the mixed uses that you see? Retail on the ground level, okay. Okay. This idea of that vertical courtyard or the kind of green space in the middle. What program would this be on the left, the tower? Looks like residential, yeah, with the balconies and all the greenery. And then office space on the right. So they're making a clear distinction of the different programmatic uses of the project. And, very kind of different design language in terms of the architecture. There's a clear distinction here. So it's in similar Tom Main fashion, this is a move that he does in a lot of his towers where the facade of the building drapes down, kind of peels off, and then kind of envelops the ground level. His Caltrans building in downtown LA does the same thing. Instead it's a perforated metal facade that drapes down the face of the building, peels up to create this shell that decomposes at the ground level to allow people to enter. So it's the same kind of gesture. A lot of architects will kind of reuse similar urban gestures and ideas in their work. It's interesting seeing the geometry of this project, the tower on the right versus what's on the left. Clearly intending for one not to overpower the other and to have a clear distinction between the two. It's Sunset Boulevard, so you have to have these iconic billboards. So rather than just sticking a rectangular billboard on the face of the building or off the street, they're integrating the kind of shape of that billboard into the architecture. So rather than just having a rectangle here for the billboard, it's angled with the cutout of the building. So the corner view is really important in any project. It's kind of the iconic image that we form in our minds, right? That landmark of any project, especially on Sunset Boulevard, it's going to have a big presence. So thinking about how you approach that corner, right? We want to see an eye-level perspective of that in these renderings. And showing the contrast between the other corner, where you can see that idea of the facade on the right slowly kind of shaping and sculpting the ground level, the roof at the retail level, and then coming down the facade here. So it's an example of one thing serving many functions, right? It's not just building facade, it's roof plane, it's this folding geometry that becomes facade again at the ground level, where there's parking down to the left. So, the idea of one geometry or one thing serving many purposes, that's a theme that you'll see a lot in architecture. So that's something to keep in mind in your own work and try to achieve that. It not only lends credibility to those moves, but it makes them harder to remove, right? Any developer that says, well, this is adding to the cost, right? It's just architectural fluff, or it's just ornament, right? Well, you could say it has a function. It's creating a roof structure. It's creating a park. It's adding all of these elements to the project and giving it character, right? So how can you remove something that's that vital to the project? So the more kind of reasons we can, more justifications we can imbue into a project, the harder it is to remove those things. And those are all skills that you'll develop over time. So this project by Dynia Architects in Denver, it's an interesting kind of combination of retail on the ground level, serving an office program in the levels above. Just from this image, you can see that it's adjacent to a train track, so the noise of that, the visibility from the train into the building, those are all constraints. Now, it's not, you know, necessarily something that you should shy away from. These are constraints that can lead to architectural innovation. They can lead to design possibilities in the project. So think of ways that, you know, maybe the angle of the facade can be such that it doesn't give, you know, train goers a view directly into the project. Maybe this louvered facade is going to create enough privacy, kind of create a privacy screen for the spaces beyond. Maybe it's going to mitigate some of the noise, right, from the noise pollution, right, adjacent to the train. So we always have to think about what are the site conditions and how do those influence the architecture, how do those create opportunities for architecture to, you know, find lines on the site. A lot of offices will start off and say, look at the site plan, where are the forces acting on this site, what are the major sight lines in the project, right? What are the conditions that are acting on this site, and how do I use those lines or those angles to start sculpting or forming or orienting the building on the site. So here, this aerial shot shows the balconies, and this is built, these are photos. Here we can see the courtyard spaces. These are balconies that each office has access to. So a really nice outdoor workspace for each of these offices. And you can see these glass garage doors at every level. So there's terrace seating and patio space. Each glass garage door opens up and gives you an outdoor experience when you're at work. So really nice place to work. You can see those kind of forces acting on the site in this diagram, where the shape of this angle is based on the direction of views. So there's views of downtown. They wanted to maintain those views, so that's the direction that they created this angle. And then they also sculpted the terraced seating out of that as well. So all of that is connected, and it's a reason, it's a justification for that as well. And what it does too is, imagine the train running down here. It's going to protect that terraced seating. It's going to protect it from the train. So you're going to have some privacy because the building itself is notched there. You know, and maybe a developer would say, well, why not just maximize the interior square footage, right? We could sell these spaces for a lot more. We can get higher rents from them. But if you take someone and you walk them through a space like this, and they see how great it would be to work there, and how these open air spaces bring in tons of natural light, tons of green space, people all of a sudden can see the selling point for something like that. So good architecture and good real estate development, that kind of thinking, they go hand in hand. It takes some education. It takes kind of seeing through the eyes of the architect when it comes to selling these projects. So here they're showing that there's a mezzanine on the ground level. So the ground level is commercial. You'll see little coffee shops, bars, things like that, all that get served by the tenants in the office space. And here you can see how the kind of shape of the mezzanine is also, it's a little microcosm of the overall form of the building. Kind of an interesting take on that. And that angle that you see, again, that was the angle to downtown. That's carried through the entire building. It's kind of the partie or the overall design concept. It's not just happening in one place, it's continuous. That angle finds its way into the floor plan. Right? So you can see this kind of shifted grid of the horizontal at the top and then the angled floor plan below. So you can see there's a seating area, this kind of indoor informal amphitheater here, where it's amphitheater style seating. all of which is meant to create a sense of community on the ground level. So if you're at work, you can go down here, grab lunch, grab a coffee, and it's kind of an internal city, right? It's this little city that's engaging, and there's streets to it, right? That's not a new idea by any means, but I think it's enacted really well here. So that's the first level, and we'll show you photos of each, but that was the first level. The second level has large tenant spaces for an office. So number one, you can see that. There's a shared kitchenette. So there's offices for different tenants, kitchen, parking on the right. And notice how the facade at the bottom here, all of those vertical louvers, they're continuous from the building itself, the program. Those louvers continue over the parking lot to unify that facade. So rather than just having a traditional commercial office building with a clear parking lot to the right, that facade unifies the entire project, so it kind of looks like it's one thing. And so on every level, right, this large tenant space at the top, you can see that that's the office, but then there are these roll-up doors, or these glass garage doors here, leading out to number 3, this balcony space where you can sit and work on a nice day. And so the architect's, graphic strategy here, as you go up each level, you're seeing the green of that level's patio, and then you can see the space below it as well. So as we go up every level, you'll see that floor's patio, and then you'll see kind of in a lighter line weight the patios below. So it's a nice way to kind of indicate what's kind of at the current section, or the current plan view, and then what's happening below. Some photos of the bar on the ground level. Here's an aerial shot showing that angle and all of the terracing that happens. So they've created this kind of urban condition, this urban city in the interior, very active. They could have pop-up shops here. They're using color in an interesting way. There's this kind of common red graphic color that runs through the whole project. You see it in the facade, you see it in the soffit of this building volume here, the ceiling. There are these super graphics on the floor kind of guiding you from one place to another. And you can see that informal seating, right? This can be a really valuable feature in any project, where today we're on our phones a lot, we want to sit and just kind of disconnect for a minute. You don't have to pay for a coffee to sit at a specific table. You just want to sit and kind of be on your own, or interact with people that you see walking by. So it's important to think about these like rest spaces and kind of the places where we can pause and take a step back, right? Thinking about the intention and how we use this kind of urban architecture is really important. So an eye-level view of all the shops. And again, as you're seeing these images, think about how great it would be to work here, see the the retail and how easy that access would be. And see the informal gathering spaces. Imagine telling coworkers, let's meet at the at the stair, and we can talk about some project, or hang out, grab lunch. So getting drinks after work, outdoor seating on a nice day, views of downtown. So the whole kind of the thought process behind the angle in that whole building, you see it all in this image. And so you're capturing this idea of the glass roll-up garage doors, outdoor seating, office workers on laptops instead, so they're more mobile, they can move around. They're not just limited to one cubicle or a desk. And then again, you're seeing that angle represented in the architecture here too. And then these are the vertical probably aluminum fins that run through the whole project and cover the parking on the right as well. Again, unifying this whole facade so that it's not just, you know, an office tower, or office building and parking structure. This is all one thing. And it's lifted up at the ground level, allowing entrance and kind of creating a more generous sidewalk, more space on the ground level. That's always a nice feature to think about what it's like on the ground level and to give back some space. This next project by EYRC Architects, Stephen Ehrlich's office. It's an interesting example of mixed use and what's, you know, this idea of the Spanish Steps in Rome, where it's not just it's not just vertical circulation to get you from A to B. It's a space in itself, right? It's a vertical plaza or piazza. So you're allowing seating and green space, pockets for planting and trees, all within the kind of grand stair. So it's not just about getting you from A to B, it's about creating a space that is, you know, a place where you can pause and hang out. So offices, retail, and you can see in the sketch that there's kind of a lot of different programmatic uses going on here. So it's showing that there's a restaurant volume above retail, so retail on the ground level, restaurant, grand stair. So they're thinking about the flows of pedestrian traffic on the site and kind of bifurcating those into separate zones. So, you know, red is more getting you from A to B, orange is a little slower, you know, for seating. So you can think of circulation as this thing as a way to slow people down, speed them up, give them the option of going at different speeds. Don't just force everyone to walk through a thoroughfare, or, you know, allow human use to inform the project. So again, they're taking various angles on the site and using those in the landscaping. So these kind of raised planters with perimeter walls here create seating. Really nice use of materials, wood and the soffit. That kind of translates into the interior. A lot of custom kind of faceted geometry and the staggered lighting.